The Canada Revenue Agency will not look into a potential $15 billion in ineligible Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy payments given to corporations. But if Canadians who are ineligible for CERB payments are required to pay the money back, why aren't we holding corporations to the same standards?
Out of the total CEWS payments handed out, a possible 14.9% are ineligible.
In 2020, 68 companies that received more than $1 billion in CEWS paid more than $5 billion in dividends to company shareholders.
15.5 is a significant amount of our federal budget. The government has spent, by comparison, $3 billion over the last 3 years to support 500,000 new job and training opportunities, 1/3 of the $15.5 billion. I mean, it just shows you how much more support there could be if one could reclaim our public money. And this is money that we have all paid into and contributed to collectively. And it's being used to underwrite corporate profit.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland
said that legally, the wage subsidy can only be used to pay employees, and it can't be used for any other purposes.
There was definitely a need for some kind of support during the pandemic, but whether or not it was direct form of subsidy to businesses is a big question mark. In a lot of cases, there's difficulty for oversight and transparency in terms of how the money is being used. In many cases, it would be much more beneficial to provide direct supports to employees. The ultimate concern was helping workers to stay afloat.
But restrictions to uphold this never existed. CEWS was not intended to line the pockets of shareholders. It was created to support payroll costs and prevent worker layoffs by helping companies experiencing considerable drops in revenues. But CEWS didn't prevent layoffs for all companies. This allowed companies to take money and still lay off workers, all while providing salary boosts to executives.
CRA Media Relations Officer Hannah Wardell told Local 514 that the CRA will always pursue cases of potential fraud and that wage subsidy applications were subjected to verification before the money was sent. Wardell said that audits have taken place and post-payment verifications will also be conducted, adding that 200 audits have resulted in approximately $11 million in gross negligence penalties. Out of the total of 8.9 million Canadians that applied for CERB, approximately 637,000 have been asked by the CRA to pay it back. 156,000 of these are Quebec residents.
Matthew Palanchuk, who received payments while he lived in Montreal, is being asked to pay $1,000 in CERB back to the CRA.
Palanchuk's CERB payments ended around the time that he started a new job. He said he was very careful in making sure that the CERB payments weren't overlapping into his new contract.
When my semester started for a graduate program in Toronto, also started a TA contract and other things. I received, I think, the last bit of funding from CERB like a day into that, and I called them. I'm like, "Is this okay?" They're like, "No, you filed it. That was for your last week of August. It's fine." You know, they're still asking for this money back when, you know, we're still seeing rates of the spread of COVID at still pretty alarming level. Increases in interest rates and inflation. You know, groceries getting more expensive, and now they want me to do these extra expenses to them when, let's just say, timing isn't great. It just so happens I'm a student. I'm also working a part-time job to help me pay bills.
What's worth the time and the energy and the resources is not to go after individuals who received CERB and their $2,000 stipend, but rather to go over corporations that are registering higher dividends for their shareholders and to the tune of $15.5 billion. This kind of corporate welfare needs to end. That's who we should be pursuing, not individuals many of whom are still struggling.
There were few conditions in place for businesses with large cash reserves or a high level of profits made during the wage subsidy period. This means that businesses could still access CEWS and report record profits that same year. Businesses did have to see a minimum decline in revenues by 15% in the first month and 30% in the second and third months to access CEWS. But should more rules have been applied to companies with large cash reserves? Air Canada, whose headquarters are in Montreal, had a cash reserve of $7.38 billion in 2019. CEWS subsidies paid for the company to hire 16,500 employees. But Air Canada was not required to make these positions full-time, meaning that workers were at a loss. They were only paid for part-time work and not allowed to access benefits. CEWS provided an advantage to corporations, but not all shareholders were aware. Suncor Energy Inc., an oil company with a refinery in Montreal, received $358.2 million in CEWS payments. The company did tell shareholders that CEWS was utilized, but it did not report just how much was accessed. Suncor's amount of CEWS subsidies were not provided in its financial statements, but were instead found in an Alberta lobbyist registry form. The CRA used to offer a registry identifying which companies access CEWS, but this database is no longer available. A 2015 report found that the CRA prioritized cracking down small-time tax violations over large violations. In 2018, an Auditor General report concluded that the CRA is lenient with medium, large, and international enterprises compared to individuals. The CRA is waiting for a repayment of $1.2 billion from individuals ineligible for CERB, but a potential $15 billion loss from ineligible CEWS payments to companies is not worth the effort. Who the CRA provides leniency towards remains unchanged.
The federal government has, really relinquished its role in the provision of social housing. So even $1 billion of federal funds that could be redirected towards our housing crisis could have a significant impact. Where are the priorities? And at the moment, the priorities are privileging profit and profit-making entities over people and, supporting particularly those who are most in need. And this is clearly a political choice. The choice to, for instance, put a lot of effort, energy, and resources, this includes money, into seeking to claw back on CERB for those that were deemed not qualified or eligible, when these are individuals whose annual salaries come nowhere near the kind of profits that some of these large corporations are able to amass. It's a travesty at all levels. The government needs to be held accountable for this.
What do you think of the CRA enforcing ineligible Canadians to pay back CERB while not holding companies ineligible for CEWS payments to the same standards? Let us know in the comments.